Good evening, everybody, and welcome this evening. I'm so sorry about the glitch. I've got no idea what caused it, but I hope that enough of you are here now and enough of you saw the film. My name is Jenny Jones. I'm a peer in the House of Lords for the Green Party. And I am thrilled to have some amazing people here who are going to answer your questions and some of my questions. So we'll be talking about the documentary, and it's all about universal basic income, which has been Green Party policy for 30 or 40 years. We called it citizens' income, but it's the same sort of thing. And I'm going to very rudely ask our guests to introduce themselves so that they can come out with any interesting facts that you don't know about them already. And we'll have, I'm not sure anymore if we're finishing at 7, but we will have some time for questions at the end. So if you could put your questions in the Q&A bit, that would be absolutely fantastic. So we've got a fascinating selection of people to answer your questions this evening. First of all, we have the directors of the film that you've just watched, Sean Blacknell and Wayne Walsh. From Gadfly Productions. I think Gadfly is something that stings cows and drives them wild, but I'll have to look that up. And then we have Jonathan Williams, who is from UBI Wales. And then, like the cherry on top, we have British philosopher and author, Professor A.C Grayling. And so I'm going to ask them all to say a few words about themselves, 2 or 3 minutes, and then we'll start with some questions. So, Sean, would you like to start?
My name is Sean. I'm a filmmaker, co-founder of Gadfly Productions and co-director of The Future of Work and Death and the Cost of Living. Do you say 2 or 3 minutes?
Yeah, but you don't have to do that because we're probably short of time, so...
That's it. I've got nothing else to say about myself.
Okay, the film said it all. Wayne.
Hi, I'm Wayne Walsh. I'm the co-director of The Future of Work and Death and the Cost of Living with Sean. We are Gadfly Productions. Gadfly actually means, the definition in the term that we use it for is someone who criticizes others in order to provoke them into action. They're kind of a philosophical annoyance to people, and that's our aim with our style of filmmaking. Yeah. So yeah, I'm a filmmaker, business owner, and that's about it.
Thank you very much. Jonathan, would you like to say a few words?
Yes, good evening everyone, and thank you very much for the invite this evening. So my name is Jonathan Williams. I'm the co-founder of UBI Lab Wales, and I'm a solicitor at Watkins & Gunn Solicitors, which is a campaigning law firm. So just to tell you a bit about UBI Lab Wales, so I'll use my 2 minutes, if that's okay, Jenny. So the aims of UBI Lab Wales is to really push universal basic income public consciousness and to really get Wales to set up a pilot so that we can learn more about a universal basic income. The lab itself is a citizens-led organisation. So it's voluntary run, and we have a range of people who have gone on to set up labs in different boroughs in Wales. So it's not just UBI Lab Wales. We have labs in Cardiff, Swansea, RCT, Caerphilly, Gwynedd, and Newport. Sorry if I forgot one there. We've passed motions in the council, so we're looking to get this from the ground up at a grassroots level. So we've had councils pass motions in Gwynedd, Swansea, and RCT. And the leader of Cardiff Council has written to the First Minister asking if they could be part of any potential pilot should that ever happen in Wales. So that's what we're aiming to do. Of course, we have the pledge work that we're doing at the moment as well, where over 100 candidates now have signed, 100 candidates for the Senedd elections, that is in May, have signed up to advocate a UBI pilot if they are elected. So yeah, that's what we're about. And again, thanks very much for the invite.
Jenny, you're muted.
Yes, Jenny, I think.
You're still muted.
Yes, still muted, Jenny. There we go.
Now you're properly muted. I imagine you might be saying that I should say a couple of things about myself. Thank you, Jenny. I've been called lots of things in my life, Cherry, that's a first. I had a long career teaching philosophy at Oxford University and then at London University, Birkbeck College. And then about 12 or so years ago, I decided to found my own university. When I told my wife this, she said, haven't you got enough to do already? Anyway, I had two big things on my side. One was enthusiasm, the other was ignorance. So managed to do it. And that's the New College of the Humanities in London. It's now part of Northeastern University. And the aim there is to get people to think about the great conversation that the humanities is, literature, philosophy, and history, to think about society, and to appreciate and understand the point and the value of a universal basic income. That's not actually a degree program at the college, but one hopes at any rate that reflective people will see the point of this, as I'm sure everybody on the call tonight will.
Annie, you're still muted, or your audio isn't working for some reason.
There we go.
Jenny was saying that they were having some problems with the internet in Devon, so I may have to ask the first question on her behalf. Professor Grayling, as we aim to transition our economy into one that promotes a dignified life for everyone and regeneration for the environment on which we all depend, what does it mean to you in relation to your work, the College of Humanities that you have created, and the question around universal basic income? And Jenny, amazing.
I'm sorry, my connection is unstable, it says. So sorry about that. Yeah, carry on without me if I get stuck.
Thanks. Well, I think one of the great benefits of a universal basic income is that what it is that we want from education in general and higher education in particular can really have a chance to express itself. You know, people go to university and they study, especially on the humanities and arts side, all sorts of things that give them wonderful insights into the human condition, into human nature, debating ideas, thinking about how best society should be organized. And then they go out into the world and immediately are sort of stuffed into a bottleneck of a career of work, and they lose a great deal of the impetus, motivation, and even indeed opportunity to think about those things. If we had a universal basic income, it would, I think, change the complexion of society in significant ways, not entirely, but it would provide more people with an opportunity to make use of what they've learned and to follow their interests. That would be a very, very good way of making the investment that we put into education pay off in social terms, because very many people would not choose to go and work in the financial sector or take up a career which absorbs all their time and energies, but maybe they'll work part-time or job share, or maybe they will be more entrepreneurial, but do things anyway that are much more aligned with their own interests. And so as an educator, I would very much like to see an economic and social dispensation in which the real value of education could properly unfold.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Jonathan a question, because you mentioned in your, when you started, about 100 cross-party candidates for this Senedd elections from 5 different parties, and they've made a pledge to support the pilot of UBI. So what has made them sign up like that? Is it your hard work?
I'd like to think so, Jenny, but not just that, of course. I think, I've been an advocate of this idea now for the best part of a decade. And I think in that time, we've seen a slow creep of this getting into the public consciousness. And particularly with, of course, Andrew Yang's campaign in America, he brought it on quite quite a way. And of course, it helped that he was a really likable guy as well, and people felt that they could resonate with the stories that he told. But I think there's no doubt in anybody's mind, particularly in the UBI movement, that the pandemic has brought this on by 5 years, if not 10 years. It's made people reevaluate the social contract that we have in society, and I think that there's people, for example, who never envisaged that they would ever have to sign up to universal credit that are now having to do that. And I think the fact that they're having to put themselves in those shoes, of course, has made them think about that welfare system. So I think the pandemic has absolutely brought this on. And that's why you're seeing now this cross-party support, and Wales has become a hotbed for it. We have the Green Party, who of course have supported it for since day dot, really. So there's no surprises there. But the fact that you have the Liberal Democrats now have made it party policy, the Labour Party, there's a number of Labour Party politicians in Wales that of course are backing the idea. Unfortunately, we haven't seen any Conservatives yet, but I don't think there's any surprises on that front. I think the pandemic has predominantly brought it on. But of course, I think what people need to remember as well is in the midst of the last national crisis that we had, the NHS was founded. And I think that's why we're really pushing this message now that this could be our generation's NHS. I think that really resonates with people, in the midst of crisis, there is great opportunity, and I think this really could be the opportunity to really, restart society for the better, really.
That's fantastic. Wayne, can I come to you and ask you why you and Sean decided to make this film? Why UBI?
UBI specifically because to be honest, it was a subject that we could have easily fit in with The Future of Work and Death, our first film, but it just didn't seem like we could have done the subject any justice, because it would have been a small section. We feel like it needed to be a standalone piece. And why now? Well, we were talking about it way back when we did The Future of Work and Death, but I'd say the reason we did put a rush on finalising the film, and I would agree with Jonathan, just like, a near-death experience would show make you aware of your own morality. I think the pandemic has just given everyone that realization that their finances are a precarious thing, that, unless you're wealthy, they don't have a lot of backing. They don't have a lot of, there's no safety net there really, that is sufficient. And I think people then, started to get onto UBI and think about this being something that we could actually use in order to make sure that something like this doesn't happen again.
Thank you, Wayne. Sean, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, we first come across the idea of a basic income as an answer to job obsolescence during the second leg of filming our first film, Future Work and Death. And to be honest, we initially thought it was kind of like some idealistic silicon bubble fix. But upon closer inspection, we realized that it really is an idea that holds water. And we tried to fit it into The Future Work and Death, but it just wouldn't flow. So we decided to make a companion piece for it.
Thank you. I'm going to come back to Anthony now and go for sort of deeper understanding of the whole situation, because I often tease my Tory colleagues at the House of Lords about the fact that they finally catch up with Green Party policy 20 years too late. And I am curious, because it's not often the right and the left in our politics can actually meet in any sort of middle ground. But UBI, although given what Jonathan just said, not many Tories, some. Why do you think this is, that people from all across the political spectrum can see the sense in it?
Well, I mean, it speaks to different interests that people on the right and left of the political spectrum have. On the left, it's a very important thing to promote social solidarity, to feel that society is something where we pool resources and look after one another, and share those resources. And on the right, things like autonomy, freedom of choice, being entrepreneurial, those sorts of things matter. And a universal basic income would satisfy both those things. It would provide an opportunity to be free to you know, make up, be creative, do something, make a fresh start if you're interested in getting something going of your own. But on the left as well, the idea that we are really helping one another to live a life which has a kind of decency to it, because poverty is very, very expensive. And it's been very well said that you know, being poor is a full-time job, because you have to struggle with the benefit system. You've got to struggle with all the difficulties of life, making ends meet and so on. And it would be tremendously liberating. It would liberate people out of all that. And the social costs, not just the bureaucracy of a welfare system, which is very uncertain and very temporary and puts a lot of stress on people, the costs of that, but the costs of poverty, the health costs, the costs of children of poor families and what happens to them in education and subsequently, the crime rates in society, etc., etc. On the right, that you could explain to people that they're going to make tremendous savings and they're going to free people up. On the left, you could make that point about social solidarity and about looking after people. So it's a case that should really be attractive to both sides of the argument.
I'm going to try those arguments. So, Jonathan, did you want to add anything to that? Because, I mean, the entrepreneurial side is quite interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, you know, it's a multifaceted idea, isn't it? It reaches into so many different aspects of life, you know, health, education. I think something that particularly interests me is, you know, educational attainment and what it will do to that. But, you know, the entrepreneurial aspect of it is, of course, very important as well, particularly when now you of course have, you know, businesses closing down and people not in work, and hopefully it would encourage people and give them the confidence to set up those businesses. I think that a lot of people don't necessarily take that leap of faith because there's no safety net to fall back on. So what you might find is, of course, it will invigorate a number of people to have, you know, to have those motivational aspiration, entrepreneurial aspirations. But I think what also is important as well is, you know, people having that, people being entrepreneurial, but of course staying within their local community as well. And what you'll find, hopefully, is that, you know, it really does energize the local economy as well, which I think is incredibly important, particularly as we try to transition, you know, into a greener economy where people are making, you know, of course, less travel commitments as well. So I think that's very important as well. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Sean, do you feel that you've been looking at the world of work? Do you feel that your film is going to impact on people who are focused on that? You know, that here we have solutions to economic and social and environmental problems.
I mean, yeah, it'd be nice to think that it would, the film would contribute to the conversation in a more nuanced debate. And yeah, of course, it'd be really cool to think that it would influence in some small way the legislation of a build out of basic income pilots. Exploring the world of work, yeah, it was exploring the world of work and the precariat that ultimately led us to the interest of a basic income. But as far as environmental justice, we didn't really indulge in that as perhaps as much as we should have. But I suppose, I mean, I realise this is a Green Party forum, but you could argue, that giving everyone capital could lead to the rise in consumerism and have a negative ecological effect. But it's not something we've really explored or thought about clearly, as is obvious now. I don't know. I don't know how to answer the questions on UBI's effect on environmental justice. So yeah, I'm wildly unqualified, and I would defer to the better judgment of Jonathan, perhaps. Although Wayne, what do you think?
You're on mute. Hey, it's my turn to say.
Sorry about that. So what, in terms of social impact, I'd say, you know, it's kind of time to start talking about UBI. That's what me and Sean kind of thought when we were making this. It's time that people look at the idea seriously. You know, it might be an idea whose time has come. We just want people to get talking about it, maybe do some pilots to see whether it could work. Because in terms of, you know, a social justice, you look at, you know, places that have had wealth extracted from them and just kind of left in the dirt. Middlesbrough is always the example that is used for that. It's time that for places that have been left impoverished, places where poverty is on the rise. I think we're in an affluent society now, and if we can afford this idea, if we can afford a basic income, we can afford to support people's basic needs. I don't know any reason why we shouldn't. And in terms of the environmental link, again, like Sean, I don't really know how to link it to that other than the consumerism argument. But I will say that it's kind of, it marries to me in the same way that it does with anything in politics with regards to poverty and, you know, poverty solving issues, is that it's a shame that it takes so many people to get angry about something in order for the government to not, you know, not think into the future and just do something about something that's clearly going to have a huge impact. Like poverty is going to have a devastating impact. The worse it gets, inequality gets higher. It's already shown the amount of problems that causes. It's the same with the environment. It's just a shame that everybody has to start making noise before the people who are in charge of making these decisions kind of do something about it, I'd say.
Thank you. If you know any Greens, they will tell you that the environment relates to absolutely everything in life. So you just to be clear about that, you'll probably get some emails about it. I want to talk about implementation. And so, Jonathan, there are a lot of examples of how UBI has worked for people in place. So which one do you think has inspired you most? Which one looks the best option?
Oh, I think I'm going to give you a politician's answer here, Jenny, and say both, really. I think that...
You've just muted, Jonathan.
My turn then. We've all had a go. So I think both, really, Jenny, really inspire me. And you know, you see the benefits that this has for people in terms of, the Finland pilot is a perfect example, the significant improvements in physical and mental well-being, which of course, you know, I think people forget that significant improvement will essentially save the public purse. So when we're talking about the costs of this, then, you know, you're saving there, which of course, you know, helps with the cost of it. But in terms of, and speaking as someone from the Rhondda Valleys, you know, I grew up in the 90s and the noughties in the Rhondda Valleys, and, you know, and seeing what deindustrialization did to a community that was thriving prior to Thatcherism, you know, because of the mining industry and so on. So seeing, you know, all of my friends and we're, you know, lacking in those opportunities and having to move out of the area, which touches on what I said earlier on about, you know, getting the economies back up and running those local communities. I think it's incredibly important that we think of both, you know, and I think that's what's really inspired me, is that what this could do for people in terms of, you know, entrepreneurialism, as we've mentioned previously, you know, physical, mental well-being, education, employment, but of course, you know, those places and the community effects of it. And that's why, you know, we're pushing for a pilot in UBI Lab Wales. We really think that there's so much that we could learn from it, from a pilot, and what impact that could have on their communities. And you know, and you saw, for example, with the Finland pilot, which is really interesting, that the people's trust in government increased significantly as well during that pilot, because they all felt like they had some sort of stake in society because they were receiving this money. So I think it's really, really interesting. I think, you know, anywhere that has a pilot, you know, any academic worth this salt would be really, really interested in the evaluation of that. So yeah, really exciting times.
No, the film's going to be incredibly useful. I resent the implication that a politician's answer is somehow less valid or less true. A quick question to Sean and Wayne, please, about how do we gather likely and unlikely allies to work together on this solution? So do you have any examples of an unlikely alliance?
Well, the short answer is no, but I mean, historically, it's not an idea that belongs exclusively, you know, to, it doesn't belong exclusively to the left or the right. And as Rutger Bregman said, it could be the crowning achievement of capitalism, in as much as you would give people capital to invest in their lives. So it needn't be a partisan idea, although it may well be fast becoming one, which arguably doesn't help precipitate the implementation, certainly not in the age of polarization and digital tribalism. We do have to work together on this, and it's crucially required that we have more conversation with critics, more nuanced debates with critics, because nuance lends itself to credibility of an idea. I really do think that, and good ideas need good PR. But unlikely alliances, I'm really sorry, Jenny, yeah, nothing springs to mind.
Yeah.
Do you want to say something, Wayne?
No, yeah, I was just going to add to that a little bit. I think the pandemic is going to reveal a lot of unlikely alliances on, people on things like UBI, basically, because I think that they're gonna need all the ideas they can get to get us back to where we were. The ruling government, and I think they're going to have to think about doing things a little differently, because if you try and implement austerity measures or anything like that after a pandemic, I think they're going to have a lot of angry people at the doorstep.
Anthony, for the final question from me, I'm going to come to you on the issue of democracy and how capitalism has this extraordinary ability to come up with extraordinarily meaningless jobs. And so I'm curious about how can we actually empower people or allow people to empower themselves to use democratic rights to start using and creating solutions to the issues that we face in society?
Well, by taking the concept of democracy very seriously. If you look at what was one of the clearest and simplest and most direct definitions ever given of it, and this is Lincoln in the famous Gettysburg Address in 1863, where he said democracy is government of the people, by the people, for the people. And by the way, the people he was talking about then, who had the power of government in their hands, were white men who owned property. So it was a pretty limited conception, but at any rate, the definition is a good one. And the important part of it is for the people. A government by the people means the people who have the vote, but for the people, there, the people means everybody. The point about poverty and the stigma attached to poverty in a society, the fact of inequality in society, the fact that in an affluent society like ours, there should be homeless people and food banks, which is absolutely unacceptable in our situation, shows you that there are moral dimensions to the question of democracy. The demos, the people, the citizens. If you think that the way we share our resources in a society is either by merit or supposed merit, so people who are very talented at music or football, or people who become CEOs of companies, well, that they merit the money that they get because of their skills and talents and so on, or need. So we hand out to people who have need because they need some food or some shelter. If you think only in those two terms and not in a third sense also about the fact of citizenship, about being a member of the society, about the claim that we have on one another and the duty that we have to one another to ensure that all our fellow citizens, all our fellows in society are minimally and decently provided. If there were a universal basic income, we would get rid of poverty, we would get rid of the stigma of poverty, we would get rid of the awful, uncertain scramble that people go through to try to get just enough to last from week to week on benefits which are way below the poverty level in society. And the society would be a much more decent place. And I talked earlier about the costs of poverty. I mean, these are perhaps hundreds of billions of pounds of wasted money on bureaucracy and cleaning up all the problems that poverty causes. We could save vast sums of money if we moved to UBI, and we would make ourselves a better and more responsible society. And also probably, finally, we would also probably start thinking in terms of being a more sustainable kind of economy. Instead of focusing relentlessly on growth and consumption all the time, given that people were not competing with one another for status by how much money you've got, because you've got a basic floor, you've got basic safety, and then the things that you do on top of that, you might take part in the gig economy, or, as I said, work part-time, or start something up of your own, or go back into education, or do voluntary work. I mean, all these things. And also, by the way, and really finally, that a huge contribution is made to our society by unpaid work in the home, domestic work. The only domestic work which is paid for is the work that people do in other people's homes, looking after their children and cleaning their homes. But think of the huge amount of effort that goes into, given by unpaid work, to sustaining family life and the economy. This would be a way of recognizing that, and it would be equitable, it would be fair.
One policy I've supported a lot is that within any company, there should be a 1-to-10 ratio of payment. So you can pay the top person anything you like, but you have to pay the bottom person 1-to-5. So that might sort out some of our problems as well. Now, I was going to go around, and my internet connection is unstable still. I was going to go around and ask what you all hope for the future. Have you got one sentence where you can say, before we open it up to questions, what you think is going to happen? Anthony, do you want to go first?
Sorry, I was looking at the chat there, and I wasn't paying attention to your question. I'm frightfully sorry.
Typical, right.
There's so many interesting points in the chat. Sorry, could you repeat it?
It's just, what do you hope for the future? What do you think the future is going to look like? Do we have a government that's going to accept UBI at some point?
Good God, no, not at the moment. But I do think that the future is, the UBI is the future. It's going to happen because it has to happen. We're completely unsustainable at the moment. Society is deeply unfair. Inequality is toxic. Poverty is unacceptable. We've got to find ways, certainly dealing with the climate and with consumption and this whole GDP thing. We've got to get a grip. And it's going to happen. It's either going to be forced on us, or we can do it in a rational and progressive kind of way. So it is going to happen. UBI is the future, but not with this government, I don't think.
Yes, I agree. Sean and Wayne and Jonathan, one sentence to talk about what utopia looks like. Utopia.
I'm a big fan of Buckminster Fuller and other like-minded luminaries, but I find that I can rarely climb to that level of confidence concerning the future of humanity. I would say a utopia for me would be a world that has maximized equal opportunity, mastered something approximating free energy, and that our AI overlords are actually quite charming and affable, and the UBI, obviously. Thank you. Wayne, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, I mean, my idea of utopia is always the same. Like, we opened the film with John Rawls' thought experiment that asks you to basically think about what you would like from your world before you were born into it. It's always the same thing: access to a good free education, free healthcare. I'd like basic needs to be taken care of for people, so that people don't have to experience poverty, and environmental awareness. Make sure that everybody's working together to make sure that we are progressing as a unit.
Thank you. Jonathan, one sentence.
I just wanted to say quickly, you never know with Boris Johnson. He's a great populist, and if he sees if you get some sort of group together that push the idea, you never know, he might. But I think utopia for me, UBI, of course. I'd like to see a green sovereign wealth fund whereby, we're harnessing all this clean energy and we put the profits into that, and we use the profits from that green sovereign wealth fund to pay people a UBI, invest in infrastructure such as education, transport, and so on. So I think, I think those are achievable utopian ideas.
My utopia is that we learn to live within our planetary limitations of resources, and also that those resources are shared equally. So let's see whose idea comes up. Right, I don't know if we're going beyond 7 o'clock. Holly, could you tell me if we're going beyond 7 o'clock?
We've just got 10 minutes only for questions. So they've all been upvoted in the Q&A, and the first one's from Ron Ballard, if you want to go ahead.
Oh, I see. Very clever. Yeah. Ron Ballard, I can't see you. Are you muted?
Oh, sorry. He'll remain muted. I'll read out the question. The question is, the subject of public opinion came up several times, but nobody mentioned the massive influence that is exerted by the super rich owners of mass media, who fill the public with propaganda that supports the growing inequity in the world and promotes the idea of the undeserving poor. Does the panel have any idea for how this can be tackled?
Sorry, Jenny, I think you're on mute. I just want to jump in quickly. I mean, in terms of public opinion, there's recently been a poll released by the Future Generations Commissioner, which 69% of people in Wales back a pilot. So the public, of course, are getting behind this idea. I think what's important, however, to remember is Times Radio recently released a poll that said that only 8% of people knew what a UBI is. So despite the fact that this idea has come on such a long way in the last 12 months, is clearly a lot of work to do. And of course, you know, getting the media behind the idea is of course, is one way of achieving that.
Anthony, would you like to comment?
Jenny, just a quick remark really about media. I mean, I do think that the press and the broadcast media ought to be owned by people who are citizens of this country. And there ought to be a restriction on just how much media you can own. If you own a newspaper, why should you also own a television channel? We really need many more voices. And we need many more points of view. At the moment, there are very, very few. It's an absolute stranglehold, a bottleneck really, and mainly right wing, on what people get to hear. An outstanding example of that this week has been the silence of the BBC on one scandalous issue. And that fact speaks volumes about the problem that we're in our society, because we don't have a proper public conversation about these things. And if we did, many of these ideas would be far better known and far further up the agenda. What
was the scandalous issue, Anthony?
Something to do with our Prime Minister and his various inamorata and public funds and that kind of thing.
Yes, I think, yes. The Nolan principles seem to be out the window, and that's all about political honesty. I won't come to Sean and Wayne, because I think you'll like the next question, which is, how does UBI relate to employment, salaries, wages? Are businesses likely to alter these downward if UBI was implemented? So how would fair pay be safeguarded?
I think people would probably have more bargaining power, because they aren't going to be worried about, you know, covering their bottom line of necessities, their rent, their food. Hopefully that would be covered in a sufficient UBI, and that would give them the freedom to look for a job that they want and not a job they have to do.
By the way, can I add something to that, if I may, which is that one objection that people put to the idea of UBI is, who's going to do the dirty work? Who's going to get down into the sewers and sweep the streets and so on, okay? And the answer to that is, the fact that that work has to be done means that it would have to be properly paid for, properly priced. Then we would really find out who the essential people are in our society. That's one big lesson we learned from the pandemic, who the essential people are. And they turn out to be mainly the people who, at the moment anyway, are incredibly low paid.
Yeah, unfortunately, we got away with only raising their wages by a pound, by 1%, by a pound, by 1% as well. So yeah, hopefully, like Anthony says, that would have the reverse effect on those jobs that we need covered, because someone would need to do them. So they'd have to increase the attraction there.
I think just quickly, Jenny, sorry, just to add really that this is precisely why the trade unions need to get behind this idea. You know, it will strengthen collective bargaining, and there is this taboo subject, it seems to be, with the trade unions at the moment, but it should be the complete reverse. And of course, with more money to spend, people will likely sign up to the membership fees as well. So it's win-win for the trade unions, I think.
I'm going to try for one more question, but I'm afraid it'll have to be a very quick answer. And this is from Martin Ayres, who asks, has UBI been successfully implemented elsewhere? And then I'll come to all of you in case you have some final comments. Jonathan, do you want to talk about UBI elsewhere?
Yes, so it has indeed. So I think since the late 70s, early 80s, it's been implemented in Alaska. They have a dividend from the profits of oil that they get in the state. So every year, I think it's only at $2,000 that people get. So it's quite a small basic income, but it's absolutely successful. And you know, anyone running or senator in Alaska would be loath to campaign against that. There's no way that they're going to take that away from them. So yeah, it has been implemented successfully in Alaska, absolutely.
Yeah, it's been done in other countries. It's been done in India. Sorry, I'm just making sure I'm unmuted. It's been done in India. It showed people gaining, women especially gaining independence from abusive husbands. It showed people, men not being as dependent on alcohol because they weren't traveling out to the city. They were starting businesses close to their home and investing in their local area. It doesn't really translate to the UK because we're a different kind of society, but it does show you that this idea has benefits in those areas. It could have benefits here as well. And a lot of people can argue to the death on what those benefits will be.
Yeah, no,
there will be benefits.
Yeah, it has been implemented successfully in all around the world. And the data that has been collated from these pilots has been counterintuitive and for the most part kind of critic silencing. I just want to add a kind of closing comment. Just for me personally, I think the real undertaking, the real hurdle for basic income PR to jump over is convincing largely, I would say, the working class that this isn't some wishy-washy snowflake progressivism and that this will likely be born out of necessity anyway on account of the imminent wave of technological unemployment. And changing the narrative is you know, it's a prodigious task. There are still some people that have that cultural background of original sin, you know, like you should toil the fields all your days, and there's no such thing as a free lunch, and you know, earn an honest crust, etc. And I sympathise with that, but it's really complicated, and I think that is media. Fine, the media have a very important role to play in this, but that is the main issue I see with again a build out of UBI pilots, getting the public on board and really contributing to that political will. I think it's changing the narrative, and I mean, it's not as easy as people think it is. It's going to be.
Definitely. Yeah. Thank you. Anthony, almost the final words. Is there anything on your mind you'd like to say?
Just that it seems to me that the argument for UBI is it's indisputable. I mean, it really makes such a great deal of sense. And the question now is not whether, but implementing it, getting the practicalities done, making it suitable for our kind of society, moving towards it. I think it's an idea that whose time has come. I think the times are making it come. You know, we've got a transformation in the world of work. We've got a climate crisis to deal with. We've seen the problems of inequality in society. We're fed up with poverty and with all the costs and the harms of poverty in society. We've got to get to grips with it. So it seems to me inevitable. The question is, we should move on from discussing the principle. The principle, you know, the argument makes itself, and let's get on with the practicalities. Let's do it.
Thank you very much indeed. And I'm really sorry to everybody that we've got to draw this to a close. I'm sure you'd like to hear more from our guests. If you want to hear more about Anthony's work, you can visit his new College of the Humanities and or buy his book, which is available in our Green Party shop. Holly will share those links in the chat. And if you'd like to share the movie you saw or other films by Gadfly, Holly will share that link in the chat as well. So a huge thank you to all of our guests who made it an absolutely fascinating discussion. And thank you for watching, and very good to have so many of you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.